Okay, we are live. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome, David, to the panel to the channel. I'm so excited just to have you on that I'm tripping over my words.
It's because we were just talking about a panel. That's why. That's why.
Yeah, the things that the viewers don't know is what goes on behind the scenes before talking about dark fantasy a little bit. But you are well known for writing a variety of fiction and not just epic or dark fantasy. Why don't you tell the viewers who don't know you a little bit about who you are and what your favorite kinds of genres are to write?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to it. So yeah, I'm David Green. I live in Ireland. I am from Manchester in the UK, but my family is Irish, so I'm over here now. Been here for about 13 years on the west coast, so I'm not too far away. It's just the next one over to the States. And yeah, so I mainly write. So I have two series. I have epic fantasy, which is on the darker side of epic fantasy, and I have urban fantasy as well, which is also on the darker side of urban fantasy, but it's quite hopefully humorous. But I wrote quite a lot of other stuff as well. I started off writing quite a lot of horror short stories when I first kind of got into the submission game. And just because I couldn't find anything for fantasy to do, and I was kind of nervous about writing fantasy because I love it so much, and I was like, I don't think I'm good enough to write fantasy because it's difficult to write. But I ended up doing that way. So I have all those, and I ghostwrite as well. So
Oh, wow.
mainly in fantasy, but sci-fi as well, and horror a little bit. But all the subgenres of fantasy that I would not write with my own name. I ghostwrite.
So fantasy romance might be under somebody else's name if you were to write it.
Right, yeah, exactly. I mean, nothing against it or anything. Like
Yeah, yeah.
I do put some like elements of romance in my own work, but I think now it's got to the point where if someone had read my books, they're expecting a certain something from it, and I think if I was to write a Fae uh, magic school book that was very very clean and very certain way people that read my stuff would be like, this isn't really what I'm expecting from you, but I do write that sort of stuff as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because back when we were doing the panels, one of the questions that had come up was like pen names and when to use a pen name and when to keep it under your existing genre. And it's a decision that I've struggled with in finding my author brand is
Mm-hmm.
starting out and going, well, I love these different, I'm going to really call them tropes of epic fantasy, but they don't really mesh. And it's only been after a year and a half of publishing that I'm like, no, this is what I love. I
Right.
love the dark epic. That is what I'm going to primarily write. And then what do I do with this other stuff? So it's great that you've got like that outlet to ghost write some of it or consider a different pen name. Um, and we've got Nikki on. Hey, Nikki. If you're watching live on YouTube, drop your questions in the chat and we'll pull them up as we go through. I told David that he's like the one of the unsung heroes of the Indie Fantasy Addict Facebook group, and I know I've gotten several pre-submitted questions for David, but if you have them, you can drop them in here, and if you don't watch it live, you can drop them in the comments on the replay, and I'll make sure that those get to David as well. But when I was looking through your Amazon, I mean, you're an international best-selling author. How did that come to be? Did you originally start planning to publish just like in your home country, or did you mean to publish internationally from the beginning?
Yeah, I wanted to go kind of international because obviously I live in Ireland, and the speculative fiction sort of market, I suppose, isn't very big in Ireland, which is,
Mm.
it's kind of crazy because obviously, there's even Halloween comes from Ireland, right? And there's Fae and there's all this kind of stuff and everything, but a lot of that kind of stuff is more celebrated outside of Ireland than inside of it, for
Mm.
a variety of reasons. mainly to do with persecution and other things.
Mm-hmm.
But like, there's more people that kind of are into like, Irish mythology that are in America and Australia than there are in Ireland. I mean just like in general interest, but obviously there's more people. And that's certainly the case with the writing world in Ireland. It's all very kind of still literary fiction. There's a lot of like pride about James Joyce, and like Ulysses is still seen as the main the best piece of art, and it probably is. I don't know. It's not
I mean,
my kind
not
of.
knocking the classics, but there are new books.
There are new books, right? Yeah, and poetry is still also very much. There's no money in it really, but like poetry is still seen as like the kind of, if you're going to be a writer, that's the noble thing to do, is to be a poet. So like in terms of like there's a little bit of horror around. There's a horror writer called A.M. Shine that's in the same town as me, who's got a really good book out. But there's very little in terms of fantasy and sci-fi in Ireland. So it's one of those things where it's like you have to kind of start looking outside of the country, and especially if you want to get traditionally published or anything like that, or even not even in traditionally published, even if it's independent publishing as well. There's nothing really. So you have to like. I'm with an independent publisher, and they're Canadian. So that was one of the things as well, because when I started writing, I was like, I have no idea what I want to do. I had no idea that of where to start of getting things published. So I was like literally just I'd written a book which wasn't fantasy or horror actually or anything like that, and I was like, I wonder what I should do with this now. And then I just started looking around, and I just saw lots of submissions for horror things really, and I just thought, well, that'd be good to practice and see if I can get something published, like a short story or whatever. And they were all international ones, all Canadian, American, Australian, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think that's one of the coolest things about going indie today is you're not limited to a country. Like if you go through KDP, even as self-published, you can put your book on so many different markets. Yes, what if your brand is chaos?
Yeah, yeah, there is something to be said for chaos, I think, isn't there?
Yeah,
Right?
yes.
Yeah.
Uh, and so you have a lot of experience contributing short stories to anthologies, and I guess we would consider some of them box sets too, really. But how was your experience being a part of something like that? Because you're one of the few authors that I've had on that has put work into anthologies. Do you feel like they get you decent exposure and readership, or do you feel like your stories get sort of lost?
Yeah, I think anthologies were really good for me because that's where I kind of started off with, and there's two sides of it. I mean, obviously, a lot of the ones that I was doing at first were horror, and I don't write horror anymore, and that was never kind of. I don't think I ever planned to write a horror novel of any kind.
Mm-hmm.
I like horror. I like horror movies. I like some genres of subgenres of horror books. There's some that I don't like, but there's some that I do. But it was never like a plan to write a horror book. But it was one of those things where I was like, well, I think I can write this, and it's a good place to kind of practice and start. So I got and there is an overlap between horror readers and fantasy readers as well. So no, they were good for me, and I kind of met a lot of other writers, which was, I think, important as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's the great thing about the horror kind of community, is that they're very kind of open with new people coming in, where they're very kind of like, come and join us, come on, let's go and do all this stuff. And a lot of the stuff that they do as well, a lot of the books are quite short, so you're able to kind of really kind of get into it really, really quickly. And they do a lot of anthologies. There's a lot of horror anthologies. Yeah, I have to rewrite most of them. They were a long time ago.
Isn't that incredible how how you get better and better the longer you write?
Yeah. I wouldn't. I would have to rewrite them. I wouldn't release them now, unless it was a big thing saying I wrote these like a few years ago. but yeah, it was good. And then there's the ones that I kind of like a lot were ones that were kind of shared world anthologies, where they're all kind of stories that are set in the same world. You kind of pick a few authors to work with. So I've done those across a few genres. I've done like a sci-fi one. I've done Jack the Ripper one, which was Jack the Ripper meets Lovecraft, which was really fun. But like no one buys them, right? That's the thing. It's one of those things where they are kind of niche. So they were good in terms of like learning about stuff, meeting other writers, and getting some kind of readership there as well. But I think a lot of the big kind of anthologies are very kind of romance ones these days. Ones that used to be like box sets and everything like that. They're the ones that are kind of like the ones that will really kind of get you kind of going, I think.
Yes. So one of the questions that we got pre-submitted for you was, have you always been a writer? And if not, how did you transition into this being your career?
Yeah, no, I've not always been a writer. I've always been a reader, and I wanted to be a writer from a long time. But it was one of those things where I was always like, I'll do it when I'll do it when I'm 20, or I'll do it when I'm 25, or I'll do it once I've done this. And then I got to the point where I was like, I was about to turn 35, and my son was just born, and I used to work in like kind of higher management sort of stuff for a long time, like for most of my adult life really, and it was one of those things. It was like, you got paid and you went out and worked and everything, but you never really had anything to show for it. And when my son was born, we took the decision at home that I would stay home and look after him. Which was nothing ever that I thought would ever happen, but it did, and it was great. And I've been doing that for the last 5 years. But when that happened, it was kind of like, I need to do something. I need to go out of the house to kind of talk to other adults or just see other people. Otherwise, I'd lose my mind, I think, more than what I had already lost it in the previous decades. So I kind of I saw these classes in Galway, which is the closest town to me. It's a city, but it's not really a city. It's very small. But then it was creative writing lessons, and I thought, well, if I don't do this now, where I'm at home a lot of the time, and I don't have any excuses anymore. Like, I don't have work to do and all this, then I'm never going to do it. So I just signed up for these creative writing lessons. It was with a guy called Kevin Higgins, who was Ireland's most read living poet at the time. Actually,
Oh,
and
wow.
he'd done other stuff as well. Like he'd done screenplays, and he'd done novels and what have you. But he was predominantly a poet, and so there was a few other adults in it. It's about 12 people in it or whatever. And it was like a beginner's class, and like the first thing that we had to write was you'd go in and introduce yourself the first day, and then we were given a prompt, which was to write about the worst job you ever had, and bring it in and read it in the class. That was the first thing that I properly ever wrote, and it was I won an award for it actually in Ireland at one point. And it was about, and I had to I was a manager of a like a Build-A-Bear, Build-A-Bear workshop. I used to manage one for a little
Oh,
bit, and it was the worst year of my life by far. So
and
I
then
wrote
we
this.
have horror stories based on Build-A-Bear.
Oh man, I tell you what, it was a completely realistic thing, and I wrote about it, about like just what else was going on in my life at the time. But like Build-A-Bear was like the central thing of it. But I spent most of my time dressed up in one of the mascot suits when I worked there, because there's so many kids' parties all the time, and the mascot suits are huge, and I'm like 6'2", so I was the only one who could fit in one of them. So I used to pretty much manage the shop filled with teenage girls whilst just wearing this female bunny mascot suit, which I had to take the head off when I was doing things. But I couldn't take the head off if I was on the shop floor.
Right.
So it was, and you had to be happy all of the time, and it wasn't a very happy part of my life. So I wrote about this, and that was the first thing I ever wrote, and kind of read it in a few places, and won like an award for it as well. And So that was the first thing. But there we were given this other story prompt a week or so later, which was about an out of place smile, basically. And I had this idea of like this. I'm a big fan of film noir. I had this idea of like I like unsolved crimes as well, like our mysteries. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the Taman Shud case that was in the Somerton Man. There's this thing in Australia about this guy that they found on this beach that they've never been able to kind of figure out where he came from or what happened to him or anything. There's like loads of like theories about it. And I was always fascinated by it. So I was like, wonder if like they found him and he had this smile on his face. And then I was like, I did a first chapter of a book based on this story prompt, and then I just used to write this one chapter a week for
Wow.
a year, I suppose, maybe a little bit more. Then the pandemic started, and then
Wow.
I was like, well, I finished the book probably the week after the lockdown started, and then I was like, I don't know what to do. What do I do now? Like, I've got this book and I have no idea what to do, and I have all these little short stories that I've kind of worked on that are all like different genres. I've done like westerns, and I've done sci-fi, and I'd done like all kinds of stuff, and that's where it came from. And then I've just been doing that, ever since. Like that's kind of it progressed pretty quickly from there. And yeah, that first book will be out this year as well, actually as well.
Oh wow!
So yeah.
Congratulations.
It's not fancy. I should. That's something that I should use a pen name for, but I'm not. But it's a crime thriller set in 1940s Santa Monica.
Very interesting. No, but not fantasy. So we're not going to have any like selkies or other sea-related creatures in there causing this guy to die with a smile on his face.
Nope. It's just it's straight kind of early Cold War thriller kind of thing. Like there's a couple of dream sequences in it, but because again, like the guy, like is the main character in it is like a World War II vet, so he's kind of got he's got PTSD, as a lot of them, and a lot of them kind of went into the police force afterwards, and so he has like a few like kind of like quite a lot of trauma and what have you. So there's a few like kind of like alcohol induced dream sequences in it, but nothing, no fantastical creatures, no. No, or anything like that, and it's a weird one because like I sold the rights to it to a company that's going to be serializing it. So and they want a sequel to it. So I have to get back into that headspace at some point and go, okay, I'm going to do a sequel to this thing that I wrote 3 years ago now, and I don't write these kind of things anymore. But I suppose I'm going to have to.
Oh, and there we have how you transitioned from management into writing. Actually, recently, even though you seem to have all the expertise of someone who's done this a really, really long time.
Well, I think this is a really weird thing to say, but the pandemic really came at the right time for me, right? Because it was like it was like I decided to do this thing, and it was like, well, I really have no excuse not to kind of do this anymore, because I don't know, obviously it was lockdowns were tough in every country, but in Ireland it was like you weren't allowed 2 kilometers away from your house. So it was like, I live out in the countryside, so there's nothing to do. We had to just stay at home, and so I just stayed at home and just did loads of writing. It was great.
I think a lot of us used that time at home to really like reignite our love of writing, especially fantasy, because you sort of need more time, I think, to put all those worlds down onto paper. But speaking of fantasy, so your books are moderately sized for epic fantasy books. That's being mild.
Yeah.
How do you find a balance for how much world building and character development to give readers in that epic fantasy scope without it becoming like an information dump? Because that's something you do so well in your books.
Thanks very much. Well, we say the moderately sized, but the third one in the series, I just finished it, and it's like 210,000 words now. So it's gone right out the window.
You get bigger and bigger and bigger.
You get bigger and bigger. And the reason why that one got bigger was because I decided to send one of the characters to a different culture, and it was like, well, you have to do this culture now as well, and do this and do this and do this. If I kept them all in the same place, it would have been a lot shorter. But yeah, so yeah, it's a tricky one because I think I'm not anti info dump. I think sometimes info dumps are fine, and but I think there's a time and place for them, and you have to earn them. Where what I mean by that is that you have to get to a point where it's like a logical place where it's the right time and the right characters that are involved in this, where it needs to be like, look, you need to give me this information, right? You need to tell me what's going on, and but you need to do a lot of things before that, because like, you look at a lot of classic fantasy, which I'm a big fan of, like, Wheel of Time is. I have a Wheel of Time show on YouTube because I love Wheel of Time so much. But the first kind of 150 words of the Eye of the World is people appearing and doing info dumps, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Just a procession of people arriving. Well, there's the prologue, which is just utterly bizarre when you first read it for the first time, and then when you get to Emmons Field, it's just literally just a procession of people arriving in Emmons Field, going, "I'm going to tell you a story about something." Okay, so you just listen to this story, right? And Lord of the Rings is like that as well, and other things. So but tastes have changed, and I think, and it's interesting depending on what point of view you're using as well, like what kind of tense that you're using, and if it's first person or third person. Because obviously I do both, because my urban fantasy series I do first person, and you can only know as much as what the main character knows with that, right? And it's what he see, well, what they see and what they hear, and their experiences and what have you, and that's good because you can keep readers in the dark about stuff. Then, like, it's like that. If the main character doesn't know about it, then how's the reader going to know about it, right?
Exactly.
But then it also comes into problems because there might be some bit where you're like, I'd love to just explain what this thing is over here, right? I'll just do this, but there's no way of doing it. But then when you do, unless you bring in a character that does know about it, or you send the character into that place and they experience it at the same time as the reader does, and a lot of that, then you want to do it through action, and show it instead of telling it to people. So, like, if there's so in the Nick Halloran books, if there's like a new kind of mystical weapon that's introduced, I'll have someone use it so you can see exactly what it is. There it does, instead of having someone sitting down and telling them about it. With the third person ones, again, it's the same kind of thing. You do have that scope where you can pull back a little bit and you can describe more of the scene. You can just and do this and do that, but it's still that thing as well. Is like you want to kind of root it as much as possible from the character's point of view, and again, you want to kind of, it's that balance of like telling the reader only the things that they need to know at that moment in time, instead of just telling them everything, because it's like you could, like in the next book in the Empire of Ruin series, one of the characters goes to another place, and it's like it's kind of a gradual thing. They've never been there, and this place is they're quite a secretive kind of culture. And it's kind of like you're peeling back the layers of an onion. It's like, here's what they see, and then here's the next experience, and the next experience, and the next experience. And you want to do that gradually with the character. You don't just want to be like, boom, here you go. here's how their trading system works. Here's how
Yeah.
here is it all. And there's stuff that people might want to know, like, but does the character need to know it, and is it needed for the story? So that's one of those things that, yeah. But every so often, like, there's a good info dump is great.
Yeah, and I think, Nikki, it he is masterful at the info dump, and I think a large part of that is, like you said, David, you've got sort of that classic info dump feel, but updated to be integrated in a shown way that's important to that scene, to those characters in that moment, more than here's 20 pages of how all the hierarchy of the city works.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, of course, I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan. It was one of my first big epics, and then obviously Wheel of Time and Brandon Sanderson's works, and so I'm all for lots of world building, but it
Hmm.
can be hard to pull it off right. So I take my hat off to you. It's a fine balance. In Solitude's Shadow, the two main characters are really a mother and a daughter, and they have to reconcile their relationship. Did you feel like that draws on any real life experience that you've had, or is it difficult to write if it wasn't?
Yeah, there's a few things in that. Yeah, I have like I don't have any sisters or anything like that. I do have a mother, and I have a father as well, and obviously I have a son. So because there is like a father and son relationship in it, which was a lot easier to kind of write, I think, for me. Yeah, the Zana and Colleen was challenging to write because I was a new writer at the time as well, and it was something that I just wanted to do because. Um, you see it so little of in fantasy, and I just thought it was a very interesting kind of way of exploring this world. And it's weird because Houtfeld, where it's set, is quite progressive in some ways, but also in other ways it's not. It's terribly oppressive. Um, but in terms of like gender equality and sexuality and other things, like it's really really progressive, right? It's they're fine with all this kind of stuff, in most ways. They're slipping back in some ways, I suppose, but then in other ways, in terms of like xenophobia and race relations, they're very very oppressive. And I just thought it was interesting just to show that through the lens of a very very capable mother and a very very capable daughter that have had a serious disagreement about what's right and wrong. And I didn't want to do it in I think a lot of times when I have seen like mother daughter relationships in books, it's always been about a man, right, in a way. And this one that kind of is as well, where it's in a different kind of style. It's not in like a romantic way. And it's in a way of, did you make the right decision and did you not make the right decision? And it's also from a parent's point of view. And this is where, being a new parent, it was kind of on my mind quite a lot. And Cade and Arlo have the same kind of thing at their center of their relationship as well, which is parents making decisions for the children that their children may not understand or agree with, but parents thinking that that is absolutely the right thing to do. And then I use that in my own experience from my own parents, which is not been the greatest of relationships for a long time, where it's kind of like you're looking at it and you're okay, well, I understand some of these things a little bit more now. Now I'm a parent, and thinking of me to my son, like what he will think of me when he's older. When you have to do this. So that was where that came from. And so yeah, the mother and daughter, it was. Colleen was quite an easy character to write. Actually, I didn't have too much trouble with that. Zana was a bit trickier, just to kind of get the emotion right, and that was something that was, I think, she took the most work to kind of get her. Nothing changed in the story, and nothing changed in like the decisions that she was making, but it was just the emotional side of it, just to get that correct and just to get it the right response to what was kind of her kind of journey and everything like that. And then obviously, like, she's a character that I really really like, and I got to kind of write a bit more about her in the prequel and stuff like that. And that was a real pleasure to go back and write about her when she was a little bit younger, because I really like the character. I think she's I really have a lot of time for her. I think she's one of my favourite characters that I've written. But yeah, it took she's the one that's, out of every character that I've written, she was the one that took the longest to get right. But I'm glad that I took the time to do it.
Wow. I love that the more time you spend with them, the bigger a part of like who you are as an author too, I think, for a lot of
Yeah,
people.
yeah. No, she's great, and obviously like yeah, I can't really say because of spoilers, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it was yeah, it was funny because like obviously with with her, like she was the first she was the second character that I came up with. That Colleen was the first character that I came up with, and then it was Zana was the second. But her arc was the first one that I kind of completed. That I knew what was going. So I knew straight away what her arc was in that book, and it was the one then that I had to spend the most time kind of getting to know the character. So it was like a couple of times I was like, should I still do this because I like her so much? And then I was like, no, I have to because it's right for the series. So,
Yes.
yeah.
So the next book in the series, is this going to be the last one, or will we get more of their world after the third one?
So there's going to be four, and there's the little short story prequel as well. So there's two, and there's two out at the moment. There's Sword Shadow and Path of War, and then there's the little short story called Before the Shadow. The third book is out in April, last week of March or the first week of April, and it's called Beyond Sundered Seas. And then there's going to be one more, which is going to be out by the summer, called At Eternity's Gates, and then that's it. That's the series done.
Wow.
Four done, but there could be more stories in the future. There's it's going to be the end for some of the characters, and it's going to be the end of this particular conflict. But there could be room for something else somewhere down the line.
Awesome. And then one of the biggest questions that we got before was, are there any chances that you might be coming to the US for a signing or book tour at some point?
Whereabouts in the US? Where it's a big place.
It is a big place, right? And
Right,
I
yeah.
know a lot of people went to, was it 20 Books Vegas last year? I did not go, but a lot of people went. And I'm sort of in the opposite boat than you. 60% of my readers are in the UK,
Right.
and 40% of my readers are here. So I was like, it's very difficult thinking of how would you get there? How would you get your books there and your other stuff there? But have you thought of coming to the US?
I have thought about it. Yeah, I have thought about it. I'd love to do it. Like, I love. I actually love the US. I've been a couple of times, just on like kind of vacations. But I'm really fascinated with the States, especially like frontier times and everything. I really love it, and like the kind of 1920s and 30s and everything. Like it has a real like mystique for me. So I'd love to go and do more traveling and meet up with some people and yeah, do a book signing. But I don't know, it's a big place. Like I'd have to find somewhere central. Like I don't know, like Utah, I guess. I don't know. But no, yeah, I would love to. Yeah, maybe in the future. I mean, yeah, there's some great conventions in the States. I mean, there is in the UK as well. Like, which you should come to one of them. There's some good ones, but they're a lot smaller than the ones in the States. Like the biggest one in the UK is like about 1,000 people.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, but yeah, I'd love to go to. I'd love to go to like Dragon Con. I think that'd be
Oh,
great.
yes. I've always wanted to go to Dragon Con.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, it's definitely something I'd like to do. And yeah, but it's like logistics. Like I can. Some of the conventions that I've been to are always held in are held in hotels, and people just send all the books directly from Amazon or Ingram Spark to the hotel.
That's
So
smart.
they're all arriving on these big boxes of books coming in from like the postman bringing all these books in.
Those poor hotel staff.
Right. They're all just there behind reception waiting for the writer to arrive. But yeah, there's to be ways around it. I'd love to do it. If people want me to come, they'll have to all just like do a little kind of tour for me, and they arrange the places, and I'll go. And
Chicago, Illinois is central. I mean, it is pretty central. I know there's
quite
a lot of
northern.
conventions out that way. So is St. Louis and Kansas City and down in Florida, even though it's not central geographically. A lot of people like do dual, go to the conference / go to Disney, type thing.
Yeah.
Um,
You see, Illinois Chicago is pretty much Canada as well. Like it's
yeah,
close. I could just go over the border and do both of them. Little kind of
Meet up with your press in person, but
right.
um,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
talking about big places, Canada is even even more like I'll talk to her sometimes and she'll be like, oh, I'm just going to the store. It's like a 2 hour round trip. And I'm like, I literally could drive across the entire of Ireland in 2 hours.
I'm in a state right now. I'm in Tennessee, and people are like, "Oh, you can just hop over to." Oh, it's like actually no. It's like a 12-hour drive from one end of the state to the other end of the state. So
Yeah,
I'm like way over here, and they're way over
it's crazy. I just
there.
the size just boggles my mind. I just yeah. But yeah, we'll have to plan out a route and I'll come and do my best to. Someone actually sent me a message the other day. They were like, "Are you in Salt Lake City?" And I was like, "I don't think so." Not that I know of. And they're like, they're like certain that we just saw you walking down the street, and I was like,
You're like,
probably
no.
some other bald ginger bearded person.
But if you
Wasn't
want to support David to help him get to the US, you can buy his books and
right,
like
exactly. Yeah,
follows and stuff. Seriously though, all of the links to David's books and socials are in the description box on the YouTube video if you're watching on YouTube, and he's very easy to find on Facebook and Instagram too. If you just want to like pop over there, but these books are really fantastic and heartwarming for people like me who loved the epic fantasy classics and are wanting something a little more modern at the same time. But David, we got one last question. I know we're a little over on time, and then we'll let you let you go. But do you teach any writing classes?
no, I would love to. That's actually that's one of my things that I would really like to do. Yeah, I because that's how I got my start in kind of writing with Kevin, and yeah, I'd love to do it. Just figure out a way of doing it. Really, I could online or in person. But yeah, I would love to do it. Before I was wanted to be a writer, I actually wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a history teacher. That was
Oh
my first thing.
wow!
Yeah. So like a writing classes would be like a real kind of like merger of all of my interests. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'd love to do it. If anyone would, if anyone wants to join in, let me know, and I will sort something out. But yeah, I'd love to.
Awesome. So send David a message then. Be like, "Will you teach me to write?"
Professor Green.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining and sharing with us about your writing journey and your books and just writing in general. This has been amazing.
Thanks very much. No, I really enjoyed it.
And thank you, Nikki, and everybody else who tuned in on Twitter and YouTube. If you want to see more indie author live chats or live reads, there are more coming almost every day in February. I am going to take a little bit of time off because I'm having a dental surgery done tomorrow. But we'll be back in February with more indie authors. So subscribe to the channel to see them. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks.